Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to this week's IBSI Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. um, I'm your host, Joshua Washington. For those on Instagram, here we go. Instagram wasn't working at first. Now we're all live on everything. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, and now Instagram. Instagram is from my personal account right now, Josh Wash IBSI. But everything else, we are on IBSI now, IBSI dash now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, Hope everyone's doing well. Ping your friends, ping your neighbors, ping your enemies. Tell everyone to come in here and let's get this conversation going. In a little bit, I'll have my lovely co-host with me to join me in some of the and take part in some of this other discussion that we have tonight. But I'm going to open it up here and start things off. It's been kind of a it's been a very difficult few days in Israel, as some may already know if you follow the news, especially if you're listening to this from Israel. You know more than I do what's going on right now in a much more intense way, and my heart goes out to you, and our hearts at IBSI go out to you as well. We're gonna start there here and discuss a couple of things. So I'm gonna go backwards. So just today, um, heard the news this morning for us. It was late afternoon in Israel. An Israeli woman, um, an Israeli woman by the name of Batsheva Nigrit. She was 42 years old, from Judea. She lived in Judea, Samaria. Um, she was murdered in front of her child. That was just today. Israel has a very, very fast. We talked about this before with our ambassadors, um, but they have an ambulance service where when there's immediate um, emergency, something that's urgent, Israel has this technology, or they have these little, basically these mopeds that can get around quickly and and provide immediate attention to an injured party while the ambulance is on its way over there. If you've been in Israel, you know that it's sometimes, well, often there's a lot of traffic. Well, unfortunately, at first she was listed to be in critical condition, but she was declared dead shortly after the scene. Um, at the scene, I should say, shortly after the attack. That happened earlier today, and then just 3 days ago, two Israeli men, a father and son, were shot and killed in a terror attack, again in Judea, Samaria, in the town of Huara on Saturday. Um, and Sorry, I apologize. Their names were, the father's name was Shea Silas Negreker. He's 60, and his 28-year-old son, Aviad Nir. Um, they were both murdered. Both of these victims were victims of anti-Israel Palestinian terror. And what's so there's a couple of things that are going on here. Like I said, one, at IBSI, our hearts go out to those who are mourning now, to the entire country of Israel, because even we know that even if there's not a familial connection, the country feels these types of attacks. It's very tragic, very sad, um, very brutal, and gets bloods boiling and all that kind of stuff. It's one of the things that continues to rear its ugly head, and I think, like a festering sore, continues to cause pain and further strife in Israel, um, when it comes to these terrorist attacks, is that our administration continues to fund the PLO, in violation of, ladies and gentlemen, the Taylor Force Act. There's an article that was posted. I believe it was earlier. That was written. It was earlier this year, about the Biden administration giving $2 billion to the Palestine Liberation Organization. $2 billion, billion with the B. And since then, terror attacks against Israelis rose 900%. And the subtitle of this article says it costs $10,000 to kill an Israeli child. So not only is this not happenstance, there's a couple of things that happen here that we have to highlight. You would never see this like this on the other side, which is after these terrorist attacks happened, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they celebrated, said this is a victory, this is amazing, this is beautiful, it's wonderful. And Hamas leaders, Palestinian Islamic Jihad leaders, and Palestinians on the ground were passing out candies and baked goods to children on the streets. They were celebrating. They were celebrating because Jews were successfully murdered. That's how these terrorists on the ground responded to these attacks. So that there's that going on, right? Jews are being murdered. A lot of the general public agrees with this. Now, again, we've talked about this in the past. There are many Palestinians who aren't down for this, who really do want peace. But the ones right now that are calling the shots and actually making the headlines are the ones that are killing Israelis on the streets. And I specifically, if you read pretty much any article, it'll say West Bank. Jews will. To me, that just kind of further sticks the knife in, because it's Judea. It's not the West Bank. It was the West Bank when Jordan illegally occupied it. Jordan hasn't had it since '67, and it's like the heartland of the Jewish people is Judea, right? Like, so no, it's not. They weren't in some disputed territory. That this was the heartland of the Jewish people. 3 Jews were killed in the past few days. The response to that was celebration by many Palestinian Arabs. And again, this further kind of drives the wedge in. Every time since that visit that our president made, and then the $2 billion that was given to the Palestinian Authority, every single terror attack that takes place, because you have to understand, people, the subtitle of that article is saying it costs $10,000. If you put that article back up again, it's telling you how much it actually pays. It costs $10,000 to kill a 6-year-old, and the terrorists have the money. These people are being employed. They're being employed. Like right now, some of you might be looking for a job. Some of you might be out there trying to see if you can get some part-time work, maybe drive a truck at Amazon, something, right? Maybe you have a full-time job, but in this economy, it's just not enough. You got to bring in something extra. You do something on the side, maybe drive Uber or do Postmates, or wait tables. I used to wait tables. I used to clean parking lots at malls. I used to work my grandfather's janitorial service called David and Sons. All my uncles and my father, my auntie worked there, and I did as well with a lot of my cousins. We do things, right? When we're short on money, we see that, okay, my expenses are bigger than my income. I either need to cut some expenses or I need to figure out a way to generate more income. So this is, imagine that, right? I mean, you don't have to imagine. A lot of you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Now imagine there's no jobs available anywhere, because the people who are in charge of governing you do not allow that, right? There really is not a lot of options, right, when it comes to getting work. And the only real option there is in front of you, and it's very lucrative, is to kill Israelis. And not only is that lucrative, but it's perpetual, meaning there are large sums of money, $8,000 to $10,000, that is given to a terrorist per month for like $6,000 to $8,000 for killing a Jew, and more per month if they commit suicide while doing it. Meaning, if I was a terrorist and I was being paid to murder Israelis, and I blew myself up in a town square and killed 4 or 5 Israelis, my family would get a certain amount of thousands of dollars per month for forever. My family would be set for life. Now, so that's the reality that's being shaped on the ground here with when it comes to Palestinians living in Gaza under the rule of Hamas, and now you have the rise of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So that's what's going on, and our administration is not only violating the Taylor Force Act. When I say our administration, I mean the U.S. administration. This current administration is not only violating the Taylor Force Act, which, if you don't know, the Taylor Force Act was a bill that got signed into law, legislation that says funding for the Palestinian Authority, right, the governing body of the Palestinian people in Gaza, funding will stop as long as the government continues to pay terrorists to kill Jews. It's called pay for slay. I remember a few years ago this is how many years? It's like 5 years ago now. We were with Christians United for Israel at their annual Washington, D.C. summit. And we were in the meeting room. We were talking to our Congress people and our senators. And we were in the room with Dianne Feinstein's staffer. As long as I was going to those summits, I've never met Dianne Feinstein, former senator of California, face to face. It was always her staffer, and it was the same guy. And I remember we talked about this. This was before the Taylor Force Act got signed into law, right before, actually. And we were stressing to him the importance of this bill being signed, because it's very clear that the Palestinian Authority is paying, and Hamas are paying the salaries of terrorists with the money that the U.S. and other countries give to them in aid. And this staffer looked us dead in our face and swore to the high heavens that was not what was happening. No, that's not happening. That can't happen. That is not happening. And we said, it's literally happening. Where do you think the money's coming from? We know. Do you agree with us that they're getting money? Well, yeah. Okay, then do you also agree then that it's coming from? Well, it can't come from us. It's coming from other countries. How do you know that? How do you know how their money's being? And even if it was coming from other countries, does it really matter? If we're all putting money in this pot and someone's using a big portion of this pot to pay terrorists, shouldn't we reconsider putting money in that pot? I mean, does it matter if they're touching our money or not? Like, I don't understand no, it's not happening. So he sat there and lied to us. Thankfully, it got passed through. Every time we give money to the Palestinian Authority, we are violating the Taylor Force Act. We are actually breaking the law. Our administration is actually breaking the law whenever we do this, because it is law now that we are not to fund the Palestinian Authority so long as they continue to engage and pay for slay. So we're breaking the law. So not only are we doing that, but we are effectively funding both sides of this conflict. Why am I saying that? Because Israel and the U.S. are allies. We help. We send money for certain things. People say, it's not like blanket funding where we just kind of give them money for nothing. There are certain things that Israel actually provides to the United States: intelligence, right, military, strategy, security, all that kind of stuff. Things that we can use for our own country. So, but still, we are still giving money on one side and then giving money on the other side illegally, by the way. And where is that money going to? That money that's being given to the Palestinian Authority is being used to pay mainly young men to slaughter and kill Jews, men, women, children, 6-year-olds, babies, pregnant women. Just last year, there was a terrorist. I went to a house and killed an entire family, 5 kids, a mother. Like, that money that they're getting paid is coming from us. Tell me how we're not funding both sides of this conflict. We are actually doing that. While we talk about, the Israel-U.S. and this new anti-Semitism task force that the Biden administration is heading up with some people. How are you heading up an anti-Semitism task force and you're literally funding a government that wants to kill Jews? You can't get any more anti-Semitic than murdering Jews. My goodness. But we're giving money to those people, and then we're standing in front of other people and saying, we, stand against anti-Semitism in all its forms. Don't tell me that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. So our hearts are heavy. Our hearts go out. Um, but there's also a lot of anger there because this doesn't have to be happening like this, right? It's not insensitive to suffer a tragedy and look and say, okay, but why do we keep suffering this? Okay, this is what the problem is. We need to change and fix that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. That's preserving your life, right? You go, okay, why is it that these terrorists keep doing it? Because part of the reason why, right, there's Jew hatred that's there, all that stuff, but also they're getting paid to, and whether you have a deep seated hatred for Jews or you just kind of maybe don't like them or you have no problem at all, if someone's paying you 10, 12, $15,000 a month to murder some people and you won't go to jail and the government's incentivizing it, so like there's an environment that has been created, that is perpetuating this thing, and we are helping fund it. That's us. That's us, ladies and gentlemen. And there needs to be more attention on calling stuff like that out. We have to come together, and I'm talking about whether you obviously, I mean, we know that these so-called pro-Palestinian activists will not talk anything about this. But us, whether it's pro-Israel organizations, justice-minded organizations, we have to, with one voice, call that out. That is a flagrant violation. Like I said, it's a violation of the law, and it's effectively it's killing people that we say are our allies. So that's what's happening right now. And unfortunately, until that gets dealt with, until that gets rectified, we are going to see more and more tragic deaths. We're going to light more candles. We're going to have more funerals. We're going to shed more tears. We're going to post more things on social media. But nothing's really going to change. As long as we keep funding the PLO, this will continue to happen. So that's what's happening. That's what's been happening the past few days, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I also would like to please, just briefly, we talked about this for the past 3 weeks now, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. Last week, I know our CEO and founder, along with our Speakers Bureau chief, discussed this, and then the week before, I also discussed it. But just because our CEO just published an article in our Africa Israel Weekly Substack, about Oakland, about Black Lives Matter, about Oakland, about the state of Oakland, California right now. And Maria, if you have that, if you could put that up, please. I know we talked about this for 3 weeks in a row, but I just because it was posted, I have to talk about it just a little bit again. It's called Post BLM Oakland is crying out for help and nobody cares. And now, when we say nobody cares, and I think our CEO did address this a little bit in the article itself, but also in one of his posts on LinkedIn. We're not saying literally not a single person cares, but what we are calling out are the people who said that they cared, right? They're gone. BLM was so loud and so proud and so marching down the streets and blocking highways and blocking freeways and disrupting all kinds of stuff. You had protests, we had riots, and we talked about that before. You had riots that were caused by BLM members. You had riots from Antifa. You had riots from some random white kids who just really wanted to be a part of the struggle. You had all this, FTP, which is F the police, and ACAB, all cops are bastards, all this kind of stuff. Defund the police efforts. Defund the police. Defund the police. They had them in Durham, North Carolina. Had them in Minneapolis, all over the place. And this is where, I mean, Ipsy was already speaking out from the beginning, like we talked about last week. But this is also where Ipsy really made a lot of noise, because there were Black people all around the country, especially the most crucial group of Black people were Black people who were living in these communities, in Oakland, in Chicago, in DC, in Detroit, in Minneapolis, in LA. You had Black people in these communities where people were protesting defund the police, and they were saying, excuse us, no, that's not what we want. We live here. I don't know where you guys are from, but we live here. There was a poll that was taken, and this poll said 81% of Black Americans were not for defunding they're either for more police or the same police presence. And people, oh, that's just that's just a test from one area. Da, da, da. I can see if you are any way in touch with the community across the country. We have the privilege of working with many people, Black, white, Jewish, all around the country. But also just growing up in the Black, we know, I could have told you that it was true, that most Black people didn't want that. Those same Black people might be able to tell you what's wrong with the police in their area, what's wrong with certain officers, certain precinct. But that mindset, you guys, when you go on social media and you see people just literally saying, no, all the police need to go. We need to get rid of all the police. And I'm tired of this. And da 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 da. I guarantee you, it's one of two things. It might be someone who's super broken, who actually had a really traumatic, detrimental experience with police officers, because that does happen. Like, we can't act like that doesn't happen, right? That does, just like in any entity, you have really, really ugly people who shouldn't be there, and you have great people, right? So it might be someone who's actually suffered something very traumatic because of a bad call or an ill-intentioned police officer, absolutely. But for the most part, when you see on social media, those people are not from those communities. I promise you. Or if they are, they're a little bit more removed. They're in a safer place. I promise you, because anyone who's from there, again, can tell you these are some of the issues that we have with our police. But if you say, okay, so should we defund them? They'd be like, no, absolutely not. What do you mean? What are you talking about? It's just like, for instance, it's just like, we have a lot of Ethiopian Israeli colleagues and friends, and we have discussions, and especially when we're just talking between the two of us, or my father and them, or in a group, like just a small group of us, they'll share with us sometimes some of the hardships of being in Israel. Just like in like I tell people, Israel is a country like any other country. Israel is a very, very incredible country, and what it's just its existence, right, is a miracle. But Israel is a country with people. In any country, in a house, there's 4 of us in my house. It's me and my wife, and I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, both boys. In that house, we have issues sometimes. In that house, there's strife. In that house, there can be discord. In that house, especially our sons now at this age, they go at each other all the time. So in a house of 4, if peace can't be kept 24/7 in a house of 4, what makes you think in a country full of 10 million, 15 million, a billion people, peace? So anyway, so we talk with our colleagues and friends, and they share with us sometimes some of the hardships of being in Israel. They share with us, ready, some of the racism that they face, maybe on a person-to-person basis, right? They share stories. They talk about, things that are difficult for them. Absolutely. The difference, though, between them and the ones that want to see Israel destroyed is that they still love their country. They want their country to do better. They don't want their country to disappear. And that's something that I've even discussed with some of my Ethiopian Jewish friends is, okay, I hear what you're saying, but they say that you stole the land from 48 and that you need to give it back and that Israel needs to cease to exist. Do you agree with that? Well, no. Okay, well, then you guys aren't the same. You have issues that you are bringing with your country, that you're bringing to your country in love, right? I have a problem with if me and my wife are we're arguing and there's stuff going on. We're going to bring each other, we're going to bring things to each other in love to try to solve. That's what should happen anyway, to try to solve the argument. If someone else who's some third party who doesn't live in our house, who already doesn't like, let's say already doesn't like Olga, and now he wants to go and talk mess about Olga and start, cussing her out and calling her all kinds of names and stuff. Yeah, he's going to get popped in his mouth by me. Why? Because, look, we're not vibing at the moment, but she's still my wife. And you don't love her. You're just trying to, you have your own agenda that you're trying to carry out. And that's what's going on. So going back now to Black Lives Matter, that's exactly what was happening, is that you had Black people who maybe had some concerns about police officers. Sure, they were being used. You had the mothers and fathers of these kids who were killed. These kids who were by unarmed kids that were killed by police officers. And we take everything case by case at IPSI. So nothing's a blanket statement. There were some cases where we looked and we read the reports and we said, wow, this was a really bad situation. There's some reports where we said, no, like he was charging like the Mike Brown incident, like the hands up, don't shoot thing never happened. He was charging the police officer and he got shot in his front. Like that's what happened, right? That's what happens when you try to attack a police officer who's armed, right? That's just what happened. So we were talking about that, and the parents of these people, they're hurt, they're broken, they can't believe this happening, and now Black Lives Matter is taking them and elevating their voice only for the purpose of pushing through their own agenda. And a lot of these parents have also spoken out. There's a bunch of articles. There's an article on our Substack where I kind of put most of those things together, or pretty much all of them. It's called Black Lives Matter Isn't Broken, It's Doing Exactly What It's Supposed to do. You can find it on our ibsi.substack.com. And one of the things I talk about is the families, the parents of these, Breonna Taylor's mom and Mike Brown's family and Trayvon Martin's family, who are saying, okay, BLM came here, pretend like they cared about us, raised all this money, and they left. And we haven't heard from them since. Then we found out the founders were just raising money for themselves. That's straight out of the Marxist textbook. Some of the best Marxists are closet capitalists because they make all that money and they do what they want to do, but everyone else has to be a socialist. So anyway, that's what was going on. And Ipsy called it out from the beginning, and people wanted to still hashtag and all that kind of stuff. So now Oakland is hurting. Oakland is hurting, and they're still hurting. And you know what? I know I brought it up. Like I said, I know this is the third time, but actually the point needs to be driven home. You know why? Because when this issue was being hijacked, everyone was on it. Everyone was on it. Everyone's emotions were high. Everyone wanted to talk about hashtag Black Lives Matter and post a black square. Even when we at Ipsy were like, and a lot of black people were going, hey, this is not, nope, this is an evil agenda. Oh, you guys, it's not our turn. I told you we got pushback from people who aren't even black. We have pushback from people who aren't even from our community, telling us what they think is best for our community, not listening to us at all. Now that we've moved on, Oakland and many other cities are burning, you guys. Burning. I was in Oakland a few weeks ago for a show. I played a big show. I talked about this. Oakland First Fridays is a big festival that happens every year. It's like a series that happens a few months out of the year. And my hotel was about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the place where we were performing outside. And so I walked because I was trying to save some money. And I walked and, talked to a lot of people along the way. Homelessness has exploded. But I just noticed certain areas, because I used to live in California, certain areas I knew are gone, desolate, burned down, broken. I mean, it's Oakland is burning, you guys. It's hurting. And now that we're here, it's like we've all moved on. No one cares about this anymore. The only reason why most of us were even doing the Black Lives Matter things, because it was making us feel good. Now that the results of defund the police are rearing its ugly head, are doing exactly what we said it was going to do, and it's doing it in Oakland. No, everyone's moved on. No one has nothing to say, and that's messed up, especially for those who were loud and proud and vocal. And I'm challenging those of you who might be listening and watching now who are, you made a mistake, you got caught up in it. That's great. That's fine. I mean, it's not great. It happened. Fine. We're here now. And these cities are reeling from this destructive ideology, this destructive policy that many of you promoted and thought was the best thing for Black people. I challenge you now to be just as loud about how it's actually strangling the Black communities all over this country now, and the low-income communities, and the places where police are actually needed the most, while the people who are promoting this sit comfortably in their homes, their gated communities, their areas where police are abundant and it's fine. Some of them have enough money to have private security, just like Cori Bush. She, I keep wanting to say senator. I think she's congresswoman. Sorry. She was one of the biggest advocates for defund the police, and she hired private security like shortly after that. And she was asked about it. On like ABC or one of those networks, and they said, you were talking about defund the police, and then you got private security. You know what her response was? Her response was, I'm an important person. I got to have, the people on it. Wow. Okay, so you're important. That's why you have to have your own private security. Screw the rest of them. They're not important. They don't need police. They're just collateral at this point. Like, that was the game that was being played from the beginning. From the beginning. So now that these cities are reeling, again, for those who are listening and watching, I challenge you to speak up now just as much as you were speaking up when you thought that Black Lives Matter was a great organization doing great things. I need you to be just as vocal now that defund the police, that destructive policy has seen dead men, women, and children. Please stretch thin and all that stuff. Okay, I'm gonna get off that. I'm getting off that soapbox for now, because like I said, we did talk about it the past couple of weeks, but I just wanted to bring that up just because it was an article that was published today. Again, go to ibsi.substack.com to read it. All right, now I want to reset the room just for a minute. I see a few more have hopped into Clubhouse. People going in and out of Instagram. For those who are watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, this is Israel's forum. IPSI's forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America, where we discuss all these things. Someone just said, "Oh, I see you, ma'am. I saw it as a distraction for a hidden agenda." Absolutely, and we can even go deeper into that. We talk about that, write about that in a few of our writings, but absolutely. Whenever it's we call it smoke and mirrors. Absolutely, there's a it's never just for nothing, right? And so what we're seeing here is a but anyway, I don't want to get deeper into that, but yes, ma'am, there was definitely other agendas being carried out while under the guise of justice for Black people and whatnot. So now as we're going. Again, my name is Joshua Washington, Executive Director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. If you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to post, comment. I can see them here. And in a few moments, we'll have our lovely co-host, my lovely wife, Olga Washington, our Speakers Bureau Chief. And we're going to discuss something I think that is very, very, very pivotal for the Africa-Israel Alliance, very pivotal to just power in general, superpowers and how that's shifting, power shifting to the east. We're going to talk about that a little bit. What is really going on? And how important is it? How should we be paying attention to that? So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Before we do, just a little brief commercial break. Just want to let you all know that IPSI is planning some really amazing events in 2024. It's a series of events called Africa and Israel, Looking Back and Moving Forward. Be on the lookout for that. Stay tuned. You can follow us, like I said, on all the social media platforms or join our mailing list. We will be posting more about that, but that is a music-centered event series we're doing all around the country. And right now, different parts of the world, where I've been talking with our friends at the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation about doing something in Toronto and Montreal. We're talking all the way from California all the way to DC. We got a lot of stuff planned, especially with our IPSI ambassadors, and we're looking forward to doing that as well as they're playing their own things. So we're very excited. In the midst of all that's going on, our job from the beginning when IPSI was first founded was to educate. That was the beginning. And then as we grew, educate and advocate, right? Education and advocacy and community engagement now is a huge piece to what we're doing. And our role here is just we have to, we sound the alarm, we make noise, and we equip the next generation. We affect our culture and speak the truth as best as we can. As loudly as we can, and as strategic as we can. So please, if you would like to continue or to support us in what we're doing, go to ibsi.org and donate. Become a legacy builder, and give. You can give as little as like $20 a month. If you could do more, definitely do more. But every legacy builder donation is a huge help to IPSI, and helps us and enables us to do the things that we do at a high level. All right. So again, we're gonna have a brief discussion with Olga in just a moment about what is going on in the world, what is going on outside of the U.S. things are shifting. What's shifting? How is it shifting? What's going on? All right, just 1 second, everyone. Okay. Now, as Olga is about to get on here, I'm going to go ahead and just kick this off here. We have what's called the BRICS Summit happening 2023, which is happening this weekend. And it's taking place in South Africa. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. When Olga hops on, and she'll be on just a moment, I'll ask her what that is, what it means. Their summit is coming up. There's a lot of things that are going to be discussed. BRICS makes up a huge percentage of a very breaks a very significant percentage of the world's population and the world's economy. What does it mean that these countries are banding together? And what does this summit mean for the balance of power in the world? Right? Are we now living in a time where we're seeing power shifting? So I'm going to have Olga hop on. There she is. Hello,
Good
Olga.
evening.
How are you?
Good, thank you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We just broached the conversation about BRICS, the BRICS summit coming up,
Hmm.
and what that means. What does that mean? First of all, what is the summit? What is being discussed at the summit? Why is the summit happening? What's going on? Is it a reaction to something, or is it just a new initiative? What's going on with this BRICS summit?
Oh, you're asking me, or have
I'm
you
asking
started
you.
to broach that?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, let's first of all establish what BRICS is. BRICS is an acronym for a organization of different countries. BRICS standing for Brazil, the B, R is Russia, I is India, C is China, and S is South Africa. And so these are emerging economies that several years ago, before COVID, came together and looked at initiatives and ways that they could advance cooperation amongst their countries, trade amongst their countries. And what's happened over the years is that there's been a growing interest around the BRICS group of countries. And to the extent that, if I'm not mistaken, the last time that I looked at the number, there's about 30 countries that are now knocking on the BRICS door to say, we actually want to become part of this. Think about the European movement of how there's a membership of countries, and NATO, and the G8 and the G20. So there's various types of these communities of countries across the globe. And this is one that is really, I don't want to say taking the world by storm, but it's going to be shaking things up for several reasons. So starting tomorrow in South Africa, South Africa is the host for this BRICS summit. We're going to be having representatives from all of the countries, and more specifically the presidents of all of these countries, other than the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, because there is an international warrant for his arrest. But he will be joining the summit, which is going to be taking place over 3 days in Sandton, Gauteng. And they're going to be discussing various topics, ranging from the admission or not of various other countries to the currency. There's talk about moving away from the dollar. This is something that has been spoken about for several decades across the African continent, but is now gaining momentum, not only on the African continent, but amongst this group of countries, which, it's important to note, represent 40% of the world's global population.
40%. Wow.
40% of the world's global population, and they represent a large chunk of the global economy as well. These are emerging markets. These are very, very important players. And so they're coming together to discuss things that, issues and matters that pertain to them, but also that impact the broader international community.
Wow. 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 And so a couple of things here. One thing you said, Olga, was one of the things that will be discussed at this summit would be the admission of other countries into BRICS. Who would be let in, who wouldn't be let in, da, da, da. And I guess early on, it seems that at least we know one country that probably wouldn't be let in, which is a country that wanted to come in the first place to the summit and was denied, which is France, correct? President Macron said, "Hey, I see you guys have a summit. I would love to be there," and they were like, "Nope, sorry, it's not for you." What is that? What is that gesture? Why is that there? What does that represent?
Well, I haven't looked into the details of why France was not its ask to be invited was not honored, but one need only take a look at how France has impacted, and unfortunately negatively so, the African continent
Mm,
over several decades. France is one of several countries that colonized Africa, and unfortunately, even though there's been political liberation of the colonies, or at least the countries that were French colonies, there hasn't been economic freedom from colonialism in that regards. I mean, there's countries, and they call them Francophone Africa, where they still have to go through France in order to get permission to purchase state land. They have to use the French currency. And so
mm,
France, if I may be politically incorrect, has got its tentacles still on the African continent. And there's this emerging sense of we want to be our own people for ourselves, and we don't want the West dictating what should be happening and should not be happening. And so
mm,
France is not many African countries' favorite person. And I suspect that that's the main reason why they haven't been invited to the summit. It's Africa's time in the most simplistic of terms, and Africa is going to be looking for people that want its interests, that share its interests.
mm.
China has put itself out there as being one of those
Right.
parties, as is Russia.
Wow. Wow. So that's been something that's been interesting to me. This discussion I've been seeing, whether it's amongst Africans or even some Black Americans now here, that this, wanting to throw off not just France, right? I think you said it represents more of the West, right? We don't
Hmm.
want the West
Hmm.
telling us what to do. Um, One of our officials were in Uganda, I think for a press, it was like a press conference, and asking the Ugandan president about their anti, gay bills, and he was like, America does a lot of things that we really disagree with, and we keep our mouth shut. We don't say anything. And not only that, but our CEO wrote an article. Sorry, our CEO wrote an article, um, not just about that, but about the hypocrisy of like our country um, ignoring flagrant violations of human rights in other countries, places like Iran and Saudi Arabia. How the penalty for being gay in Iran is death by hanging in the public square and things like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Ukraine even, it has these very, very intense anti-gay laws. Nothing. We could give billions of dollars to Ukraine. We continue to give money to Iran. We continue, but Africa, 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 and so I hear you when you say the West, right? It's not just France, but it's like the West keeps telling us what to do. Um, Go ahead, go ahead.
What's also interesting is we talk about the countries that were invited to attend the summit as friends or as guests of the BRICS countries. And of these countries, it doesn't seem as if any countries from the West were invited. The last list that I saw was that these were countries from the continent of Africa, Latin America, Asia, as well as the Caribbean, which is telling.
Mm,
Which is
mm,
telling, right? So there's no invitees from Northern America, no invitees from Europe. There really is a rejection of the West and the rejection of Europe. And I think
mm,
a rejection of the West and Europe for several things, right? The values, like it's like, no, we're not about these values, just as you've expounded upon a little with regards to the article that our CEO wrote. And there's also with regards to the economic power to say, no, we're not going to be bullied into
right.
taking your aid and following your currency in order for your agenda to come to the fore. And so
Mm,
there really is this shift that's happening. And it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of this particular summit is.
absolutely. Yeah, we're eager. I'm eager to see what comes from this. I really am. My well, I want to ask you actually, what is as a South African, okay, as a daughter of Africa, what is your prayer right now for Africa in this pivotal time?
Um, Several things. So one is that we, in our quest to truly experience not only political freedom and liberation, but economic freedom and liberation, that we will embrace people who truly are our friends. It would be unfortunate if we were to reject those who don't have our best interests at heart, and then go into the arms of those people that do have, that also don't have our best interests at heart. And so
Yeah.
a prayer for me is for wisdom for the leaders on the African continent. That they really will, with God's wisdom and His guidance, seek those avenues, those relationships that are for the betterment of the African people.
Mm,
Um, Another thing, particularly as a South African, is that it's very interesting that South Africa is the only African country, at least at the moment, that is a member of BRICS. And for many decades, particularly at the dawn of the democracy in South Africa, people spoke about how the entrance onto the continent with regards to economic opportunity and infrastructure building, that South Africa had a very key role to play, because at that time and at various times over the last several decades, it has been one of the leading economies, if not the leading economy, changing places from time to time with Nigeria, but that the move of whatever, whether it's a cultural wave or
mm,
new economic opportunities, starts at the bottom, and that, like South Africa, is the gateway to the rest of the continent. And so,
mm,
with this real level of responsibility also is that there is an appreciation of the leader that South Africa is to the rest of the continent, that we lead
mm,
wisely, that we lead with the right values. There have been times where, unfortunately, my country has not led in a way that would ensure that God's hand continues to bless not only South Africa, but the continent of Africa, with regards to very illiberal laws that are against the family, that are against traditional African values, and
mm,
even in instances that we've spoken about before, its stance in relation to Israel. It needs to be a leader showing Africans and the rest of Africa how to do it and what to do it, and also being the right partner in arms with African countries.
mm. Wow, wow, wow. Yes, if there's one thing that is certain, I think, is that Africa really is at a turning point, at a tipping point,
Mhm.
and really, it's like we're at a point where it really could go a few different ways. It really can go a few different ways. What is this? Well, I'm going to share a little bit what I think, and I'll also ask you too. When it comes to the Africa-Israel relationship,
Yeah.
we see our CEO was just at an African Leadership Summit where um, leaders from all over Africa were in Jerusalem, um, and like hearing from, sharing, and connecting with Israelis, Israeli businessmen, Israeli tech people, Israeli security people. Right? It was there were so many things that were discussed, and there are so many partners on the ground, I think, that have been doing this for years now in terms of just this relationship. We see it all the time, right? Israeli NGOs, Israeli businesses, even government entities working alongside African NGOs and businesses, and unfortunately, on a governmental level, sometimes we don't see that as much. We either see, in South Africa's case, the government more hostile, or we see, like when we see in the UN, a lot of African countries that don't vote, that either vote against Israel or abstain when it comes to voting for Israel, all those things. But in terms of on the ground, though, the people on the ground, the culture, the young people like you and me who are, who have things going on, and they want partners and they want strategic partners. There's a lot of cooperation going on, and I see this as a potential. I think Tucker Carlson had just met with the president of Serbia.
Mhm.
He was sharing that that power could very well shift to the east and move away from the west.
Mhm.
And I believe that. I think we've been kind of seeing that for the past few years now, but I believe that that's happening. And in that shifting, Africa and Israel, that alliance could really be on top. That really could be the next global power. Is that powerhouse, that dual, um, ruler, if you will, like, global superpower type of thing. What do you think? How do you think this affects the Africa-Israel relationship?
Well, first of all, I think that people in our space need to start paying more attention to what's happening on the African continent. Thankfully, not only because of our heritage and our focus in relation to our audience, but also prophetically, we've been able to say, in Africa, there's something that's going to be happening soon. And so, for those who don't necessarily care about the prophecies, or maybe may not even care about Africa as a continent, if you care about economy, if you care about political power, and if you care about social power, if you care about culture, I mean, there are just so many things that are adding up. It's almost like a scaffold that it really is making ignoring the Africa-Israel relationship something that would happen to a person or an organization's detriment. And so, whether it's because of BRICS and the growing influence and power economically of BRICS, politically as well in relation of BRICS, we're not only talking about the shift of economic power from the West to the East, but also political power. If one also thinks about the UN and other entities of the United Nations. I've been saying for years that the next Security Council seat that's going to be permanent is going to be awarded to Africa. And so countries like Israel that want to ensure that there is a partner and ally on the Security Council that's able to veto decisions that are not in favor of it should be supporting Africa. And yes, when we talk Africa, we don't talk about it as a country, even though sometimes we can allude to it as if it's a country. It's made up of 54 individual and sovereign
Mm.
countries, most of them sovereign. Um, it's important that we need to start paying attention to it. So if we're talking about Israel being put in a position where it can become more secure, where its people can become more secure, where opportunities that Israel has for the betterment of its people, but also to give to the rest of the world, and frankly, also the opportunity for countries across the world that want to benefit from Africa. Africa has got the world's largest amount of arable land. It's got in 2030, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's 2050, it's going to be having half of the world's youth population on the continent. We have got riches, we've got minerals, we've got timber, fish, diamond, gold, ore. I mean, we can go on and on and on. And so other countries, if they're looking for partners with regards to investment as well as manufacturing opportunities, it makes sense to start paying attention to Africa and more specifically the Africa-Israel relationship. So
Mm.
if you haven't been reading about Africa and Israel, if you haven't been studying, if you haven't been following, it's time that you do
Time.
that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think that it's crucial, like you said. It's a very crucial time. So that's happening this weekend, you guys. The BRICS Summit is over the weekend. I think it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday this week.
No, I actually think it starts tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Oh, you're right. 22nd, 24th. You're right. You're right. It starts tomorrow. We're looking forward to seeing what happens from this. IPSI is kind of like standing, on our tippy toes, just waiting to see what comes of this, because it is a very huge thing. We talked, and our CEO talks about this before too, as the West seems to be descending more into Jew hatred, and not just Jew hatred, but just like degradation, right? Our families are have fallen apart. Depression rates are at an all-time high, and all these different things. And as that continues to happen, and we're seeing it, we even see it in schools, right? They're teaching in public schools um, all kinds of stuff. But we're talking about Israel today. That Israel is an apartheid state. That Israel harvests Palestinian organ. They're teaching that, by the way, in Ivy League colleges, not just elementary schools, but at the highest level of education, while they're pumping that propaganda into our American students and our into academia here in America. The Abraham Accords have been going very well. A lot of Arab countries have made peace with Israel, working with Israel. Now we're seeing this. A lot of African countries now who never were at war with Israel, so didn't have to make peace, are working now more. That we're seeing this happening more and more on the East as the West is kind of losing our collective mind. So interested. And like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Olga. Go ahead.
So a thought just came to mind in that we've spoken about the positive angle of looking to the Africa-Israel relationship and what that could potentially be. And I think the opposite side of it we should also touch on slightly, and that is the danger of ignoring what a strengthening of the Russian presence on the African continent may be. You and I know that it's Russian propaganda that has infiltrated and influenced, and in fact, if I may be so blunt, has shaped the current war that we're in, the ideological
Yeah.
war, right? When it was noted way back in the 60s and maybe even before that, that Israel was going to be okay geopolitically. Like, she's got a strong army, she was winning wars that people didn't expect her to win. The ideological warfare with regards to racism is, Zionism is racism, and Israel is an apartheid state, and this whole notion of the oppressed versus the oppressor. This is Russia. This is Russia propaganda that's spoken into it. So now imagine the opportunity for this Russian propaganda in relation
Yeah.
to um, Israel and anti-Semitism thriving on a continent where, by their very, on the whole, the core of Africans, even if they don't know it, we're
Mm,
Zionists. Like, we're Zionists. Our stories are about Zion. Our stories in relation to Israel. There's so many things, and even in Pastor Dumisani's book, uh, Israel and the Black Church, he expands upon that. So imagine a country, or at least a continent, that is ripe with regards to its love and its appreciation for Israel, being infiltrated by Marxist propaganda that would unfortunately turn it against Israel. So I
mm,
think we also need to raise the flag in that regard, that it would be sad, 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 and unfortunate. But thank the Lord, Ipsy's around, Daisy's around, and we're going to be working very hard to ensure that that doesn't happen.
absolutely. And that's an amazing point to raise too, because and I think what you're saying, I've seen it at least. Well, I know you have too, being echoed even amongst Africa's youth, right? Especially in South Africa, that it's great that we're not, that we're starting to to be politically incorrect, to grow a pair, right? We're telling the West, you can't tell us what to do anymore, and fine, we'll
Mhm,
figure out our own way without your aid. And so it's
mhm,
great, but it would be a tragedy to run fully and blindly into the arms of a China or Russia,
mhm,
right? And
mhm,
and but in the argument that Africa has to strategically work with people that would benefit Africa's interests, just like the US, just like every country does. Even in a
yeah,
business relationship, sometimes you partner with someone business wise that personally you would never spend time with, you don't really like very much, but they have what you need business wise, and you have what they need. Okay, fine. I think I referenced
mhm,
this before, but it's like we watched Secret Wars, the Marvel series with Nick Fury, and it was like the last episode of the series. I think the British lady was talking to the girl character, and they were kind of enemies. And she said, "Let's work together." And the girl basically was like, "How do I know I can trust you?" She's like, "Stop. Let's just stop all that. You're gonna use me. I'm gonna use you. That's how this is gonna work." And she's like,
yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
Like I have things I need to get done. Let's not act like we're best friends. Let's not act like we're
mm,
buddies. No, you're gonna use me for your purposes, and I'm gonna use you for my purposes. That's how it is. And really, that's how a functioning country really functions. Is we have to work in the best interest of our country. If that means that we, in this aspect, work with this country and that country, that's our prerogative. And I think that more Africans are starting to kind of articulate that. Go ahead.
and I think that's a stance that they prefer, right? Because then you know what you're dealing
Yeah.
with. You're not being swooned
Hmm.
and convinced that there's this love relationship, and meanwhile there's interests that are being pumped into you, or an agenda and narrative that is contrary to who
Yep.
you are and what you
Yep.
are. And you've been hoodwinked into thinking that this relationship is mutually beneficial. Meanwhile, it's for your
Hmm.
destruction. So rather, I know that I have to have my back as I deal with you, because you may be um, acting contrary to my interests, but then you also know that that's about me. And so,
Absolutely.
what's that saying? Rather the devil you know than the devil you
Rather the
don't
devil,
know.
I mean, here's the thing: because those countries are acting in their best interests. You think Russia is
Yeah.
just no? Russia, China, Brazil, everyone's they're trying to benefit their country. So why not also African countries work in their best interest? So absolutely,
Mhm.
you're totally right. Um, and
And also,
yeah,
I'm sorry, let me say this, and then I'm going to
go
shut
ahead,
up
go ahead.
potentially. There's also like a level of respect that these countries afford African leaders, and these African countries, that they aren't afforded when they travel to the West, right?
Yep.
We can talk about this on another day, but there's also a respect thing, I almost want to call it like a peer
Hmm.
thing, right? Like, we're all presidents, we're all leaders, versus, oh, I'm the president and I'm going to look down on you because I come from a first world country, whatever
Mm,
the title may be.
that's
Yeah,
very
so
interesting.
there's also
That's
that.
interesting, and
Mhm.
I actually would love to discuss that our next one, because I never actually even I didn't think about it like that before, but that is another aspect that's there. Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, Olga, thank you very much. I appreciate you for coming in, and um, it is 9 o'clock on the East Coast. I don't know where you all are in the world, but wherever you are, I hope you've enjoyed this session. Olga, is there something that you want to last thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, thank you for your support. Ipsy wouldn't be able to do the work that it does without our friends, without our supporters. If you haven't heard about our Legacy Builders initiative, I encourage you to go onto www, what's it,
Mm-hmm.
ipsy.org, right? Because we're listening
IBSI.org.
to each
Yep.
we recently changed our website address and become a legacy builder. We really are not able to do what we do without financial help, without your support, and without your prayers. So thank you for giving us a platform to change the world.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, please become a legacy builder. All who are listening right now, if you're on Clubhouse, you can't see this QR code, but you can go to ibsi.org, click donate, and you can become a legacy builder. Legacy builder is just someone who gives monthly. Sometimes they're very small amounts, sometimes they're larger, whatever you can. It all helps us continue to do the work of Black and Jewish and Africa Israel solidarity.
Mhm.
So thank you.
Tax
Say again?
deductible. Tax
It's
deductible.
it's a
It's
tax
tax
deductible.
deductible.
We are a
Yeah.
501c3 nonprofit, so all your donations are tax deductible. So please, yes, ibsi.org, become a legacy builder, help us continue this very, very crucial work. Thank you so much. You all have a good week further. It's Monday now, so as you start the rest of your week, um, would you have a great week? And we'll see you again next Monday, same time, same place. Good
Good
night.
night.